Eric from Dale here with Rick Earl from Elon University. So, Rick, thanks for joining us. So, why don't you give us a little overview of like all these different hats you wear for the school?
Yeah. So we have four different things going on, four major things going on for stuff on campus. So we have a music production recording arts program. So there's recording studios associated with that. We have sports broadcast division called Elon Sports Vision. So we do broadcast for all our D1 sports. And then we are responsible for theater and then a bunch of large scale events like graduation, convocation, and that type of thing. And then we have another division that's event technology support that will do board of trustees meetings and a lot of the kind of day-to-day stuff on campus. And then occasionally we get sucked into a concert or a student union board event or that type of thing. So they got us running in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah, I was about to say, how do you balance all this stuff? It looks like your typical week there is pretty much like a whirlwind, huh?
Yeah, sometimes it gets kind of crazy. So this week is not too bad. There's a musical American Paris is in. So, we help get them up and running, help with wireless coordination. They have a new Aviom system for the pit. So getting that integrated into our systems, but they're running and they're in pretty good shape. I think most of what else I've been dealing with actually been nice. Tuesday morning, we have a speaker coming in for Veterans Day. Then we turned over the theater dress rehearsal for a concert. That's the next night. And then turn that over, jazz band for 2 nights. So a lot of it's just planning ahead.
Sure. I'll bet it is. Yeah, it's probably a lot of logistics. How did you originally come to the school? What were you doing before that? Like, what's a little bit about your background in audio in the industry?
Well, so I started out as a freelancer, regional bands, toured with bands. From that, I've decided that, the money and the sanity was probably more on the corporate side. So I started working for a production company doing more corporate events, which put me in contact with both an agent and the boss who hired me here. I did a few events for them, both directly for the university and then some outside the university. And they decided they wanted this position. They came to me. So if you had asked me, so that was 20 years ago? Will be 20 years.
Nice. Yeah.
If you had asked me 25 years ago that if I'd be working at a university, I would have probably laughed at you. But I'm doing a lot of what I did before, but it's just kind of contained here.
No, I see that you've got some acclaim there. Like you got an award in 23 for staff excellence, and it looks like you've been asked to speak on some panels, some of these theatrical shows and stuff like that. So I guess the next question is, how did you start working your way into the actual procurement end of things? Like, when did they start coming to you asking, hey, we need help to start actually speccing stuff out rather than just using it?
It took a little bit to, I guess, maybe prove myself. But, the first event I was responsible for, it was an old analog mixing console, and it was a 24-channel console, and 6 channels didn't work at all. And I went to my boss. I said, I can't. If you're expecting me to be responsible for this, I have to have some say in what we're using. And so I started speccing stuff, and it worked, and the quality went up, and people noticed the quality went up. And it's, like anywhere else in this industry, it's building trust. You can have a resume, 20 pages long, but a lot of it's just building trust.
It's absolutely. So speaking of trust, Dale and Elon kind of came together in maybe a little bit of a serpentine way, in which one of your colleagues who was working on the studio, working with Walter Stork, kind of came to us and was looking for some gear and everything. You guys are taken care of by Dave Prentice here at Dale. How did you and Dave build up this rapport over the years, trying to work through some of these things?
When we talk about large scale events, they're large. So when we do, for example, graduation, we basically there's 4 venues that are involved with our graduation activities, but specifically we have a pipe organ on South Campus, or the main campus, that's in a 100-year-old building. And the graduation is down 3/4 of a mile away down the road in Char Center. And we do that via Dante. So we actually play the organ remotely. We bring back the audio via Dante. So it works great. And we do this with multiple venues. But, part of it for us is managing that. So domain manager was the way to go for that. And because it is, it's a university-wide enterprise network. When we're looking at domain manager, Audinate was pretty specific about, not anybody could deal with it.
Mhm.
And so, part of it for me was, all right, we're dealers. And, Dale was one of those companies that was more than just a dealer. They
Mhm.
weren't just an integrator. The problem with when you work with just an integrator is they want to start integrating. So you get this
Mhm.
other pressure. There was no pressure. It was, here's a product. This is what we want. Here's a company that can support it because you
Mhm.
have the way to support it. And it's been a good partnership ever since,
Mhm.
not just with domain manager, but
Mhm.
with other things that we've been implementing.
Yeah, no, I know. And I know the pipe organ story is, in audio networking circles is kind of like the stuff of legend. That's like one of the most famous uses of it I think I've ever heard in my entire career in the whole however many year history of Dante. What's some of what you learned from doing something that ambitious, having to do such a thing and making it work so well? I mean, what's some of the takeaways you got from having to think outside the box and having to think so big for something like that?
So so Dante started for me, I think it was the first Yamaha Audioversity. I think it was the one in Nashville. And I first saw Dante and I'm like, "Ooh, there's a solution I need." And
Mm.
so it started out, we had remodeled our old gym and we were outgrowing the space. So we had to use the practice gym and the old gym to accommodate things. And when they remodeled it, I didn't have a signal path. Dante worked great. And I had an old Yamaha M7 and a LS9 and I had Dante cards for both of them and a Cat 5 cable between the two. And all of a sudden I was networked. And then, I realized, well, I can expand this out. So I talked to my network folks and they're like, yeah, sure, you can do this. The bigger thing for me was, going across campus was I had to really learn about net. I wasn't a network person. I mean, networking for audio was kind of new. So I had to really learn about networking. I'm asking our IT folks how to, that I want to use our network. They're not going to learn about audio because they don't need to. So I needed to learn about networking. So once that came up, that was helped me move forward. And then the organ part was we're working with SSOS, who was updating our organ, and I literally was watching them program it with a laptop, and he was literally playing the organ off his laptop, and I'm like, with a network cable on, so we could do this across the network. And he goes, oh, of course. It came out to, it was really, a combination of an idea and just being persistent with it.
What do you find are really some of the best solution-based brands or manufacturers you're finding out there today? Like you mentioned how you went to this Yamaha thing, and that's really where you were given the real shot of what Dante is like for the first time in your career. Who you really like these days in terms of like, wow, these guys have really got it going on?
Well, Yamaha's still one of them. I mean, it's baked into their products. I've been buying Glen Sound and Studio Technologies products from you. So, now I have Dante-based intercom systems and the Glen Sound. We actually use the Lobeatrix call light as our live light. So when we have it tied back into the console, when the DCA is up for the organ, the call light lights up on the console. So they know that the mics are live. So it's a really great solution for that because we're able to do that without having to come up with some other specialty way to get, that signal back over the network. And what's really good about it is when we do broadcast, for example, commencement is also simulcast. So we have the console for the live, we have a console for broadcast, and then we also broadcast in Spanish language. So when those consoles are up, they're all right up that Beatrice, but I can tell by what color's up who hasn't muted their mics or whatever. So it's been
That's great.
They've been, when we first got it, trying to understand the programming. You guys helped us out with that. So it's been these companies that have embraced it and realized what you can do with it, and they're building it into their products, other than just getting audio from point A to B. I think is the fantastic part of it.
So what are you doing for comms? I know that one of your colleagues had reached out to us looking to get some ClearCom going in the theater and work with you to try and make sure it was integrated into the network and all that other good stuff. I was talking to David about this yesterday, and he said that apparently somebody somewhere actually didn't spec it all out the right way. And it turns out that the gentleman who is your local ClearCom person was actually a great friend of David's from when he used to work at a different company. So David was actually looking at this and seeing that his name was on it and just kind of contacted him as a friend. Like, hey, man, it's good to see your name again. I see you landed at Clearcom. And they started talking about it. And it turns out that, it gave them enough pause to look at it and say, hey, you know what? You guys got to revise this spec, and I don't know if I think your colleague might have just gotten some incorrect info from another individual somewhere else, somewhere along the telephone line.
Yeah.
And, and luckily David was able to leverage this guy and go, hey, man, his name was Paul. He said, hey, Paul, we got to talk about this. And David actually had a really nice conversation with your colleague. I believe it was a woman that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, and that was the value. So when it came down to this came about, that department had received some extra funding last year. And so they had to work quickly, and they decided they wanted the Clearcom. And, I didn't have enough time to look over the spec, but the spec came from Clearcom. So I'm like, okay, they must have spec'd out correctly. But I also knew that there was going to be more than just buying this, right? It's not something that you just open up the box and hook everything up and go to town. So when we talked about this, I said, look, this is something you want Dale to do. You don't look for price, because you really need to be looking for support. So that's where that came about, was the fact of that support. And that was the best thing, was because you were able to find a problem with the spec. So we were able to do the right thing. And then it turned out, on top of that, once we got it in here, we actually had a bad unit. So
wow.
we had to swap out the unit. So it made it a little bit difficult. But, all in all, I think everybody was, that's, for our part, we're getting that support to make this work, because it is a newer technology for us. We do have other Clearcom systems, but, with a wireless, it's just one that I hadn't dealt with before. So
what's it overall like, just having this rapport with David Prentice, that you can feel comfortable with him?
So, we touched on this earlier before we started. Part of what makes this industry work is exactly that, right? The rapport with David is just like his rapport with Paul at Clearcom, right? They take the time to understand. I think it was not this past AES, but the year before, when it was in New York, I stopped by the Dale booth, and I was introduced to other people in the company, and they all knew who I was, and they knew about me. So that tells me that as a company, you care about, right? It's not just Dave's little, I'm not just a check mark and, the profit column. It is, I'm a customer, we're important. You share things amongst each other, which tells me also that, no one of us is an expert. So you're sharing stuff because you want to be able to answer those questions. To me, that's what I'm getting out of this. It's not just Dave, it's company-wide. I feel like I'm getting support.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I was working on, but Dave's like, let me give you to somebody else who answered those questions.
Right. It was probably our colleague Joel.
Yeah.
He's probably about as technically sound as anybody, and is our resident specialist on the Dante Domain Manager platform. He got the deepest training out of anybody in-house. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. We definitely don't see anybody as numbers. We don't see just text on a spreadsheet or text in our computer system going, oh yeah, this is just some guy at a school. That's important. We touched on this a little bit earlier too, is obviously Elon's got a ton of different curriculi that happens there, different majors. You got political science, religious studies. What's it like having to try and, claw every possible dollar for the programs that you are in charge of versus all these other things? Is it really tough when you have that many different facets of a school to deal with?
Yeah, sometimes it's tough. One is managing expectations, right? So we have, for example, we have 2 DM7s and 2 DM7Cs. We don't have 4 Ravages, right? So we try to be smart about how we purchase. We look at functionality first. I partner with our classroom technology folks so that when it comes to some of our larger installations, we really try to look at the functionality of those spaces so that we're stretching our money the best possible way. And, just even from a console standpoint, it helps having the Yamaha ecosystem or the Shure ecosystem in our wireless. It really gives us that flexibility. I think for this musical, they're using 24 wirelesses. So that department owns 16. I own 20 some. In combination, we can do more. For a bigger musical, we can consolidate our equipment. On the backside, if something breaks of mine, and I'm like, hey, I'm short a couple of body packs, can I borrow some body packs? So we try to make sure that we're communicating with each other. So again, that was another department that bought the intercom,
Mm-hmm.
but they brought me in to get my opinion. That's where I introduced them to Dale for exactly those same reasons, is trying to make sure that we're getting the most out of the money that we are spending.
Completely unrelated question that's, to what we're talking about, but as something you just mentioned, what's RF like in a region like that? Because you guys are near Greensboro, you're in that whole area with the triangle. I mean, that must be some real fun RF down there at times.
It's not too bad. So I'm able to do, inside we're okay. The theater is the whole, there's so much metal in the theater, it's pretty good Faraday shield. It was actually interesting during the pandemic. We were doing one event they were actually doing on video. So we did it outside, to keep everybody separated. And so I moved these antennas outside and do a scan. I'm like, holy cow, look at all this stuff. Yeah. So the theater is great for being able to give us isolation. But yes, outside and some of those events can be difficult. And the weird part is we actually have a weird anomaly north of us is Roanoke, and there's a TV station there that should be out of range. It doesn't even show up in the database, and you do a scan and it's fine. And then in early morning, I was actually doing broadcast for football, and all of a sudden I'm like getting some hits on my mic. I'm like, what's going on? So I'm doing a scan, and I was like, there's a TV station there. It didn't exist. And I was looking, and I finally found out where it was. So now I just have to have that as an exclusion frequency for all the stuff we do. But it's not too bad, but we do get some big numbers sometimes with wireless in some of our bigger events. So my students, I make them do it every show. It's mostly Shure. We're using a wireless workbench, but every single show, I don't care if I have 2 shows back to back in the same theater, you're going to coordinate wireless because I want to get them into the habit of looking at.
What's the most RF you would ever typically run at any given time? Like, what's the most you've ever had to try and coordinate in a space like that?
Last year, 2 years ago for commencement, we had alum that she's been on Broadway, and so they decided they have a singer. So we had like 20 wireless on stage plus those speakers. So it was like 24 on the commencement stage plus IFB plus we coordinate. So we have a press corps and a student press corps. So we coordinate those exclusions. But then we set up in zones because then we also have a baccalaureate, which was another 12 channels of wireless, but then there's a rain plan, so there's another 12. So I think we're close to, and that one was close to about 60 channels. And we've done some musicals that have been the same, close to 60 some channels. I would say it was probably the most we've done at any one point. I do set up zones. We try to set up zones for a press corps. They're running from one event to the next, so they can basically walk in, not have to worry about it. It's not too bad. For a lot of people, it's kind of daunting when they start thinking numbers of 60, but we've been pretty successful with it.
Do you have any kind of stuff coming up, like you're trying to work on for the future? Any kind of expansions or anything that you think you're looking to do anytime soon? Or
well, we have one space that's the old gym that we're looking at possibly converting into more of an event space. So there's some discussion starting to talk about that. I think one of the other initiatives that happened last year with this funding was one of the performing arts faculty took a sabbatical last year to learn more about immersive audio for this spring musical. And Rent is a student sound designer who's also interested in immersive. So we're basically designing an immersive system, a temporary immersive system to move into the theater. So there's going to be both creating some content. One of the things we did was we developed notes from how they were dealing with the Sphere out in Vegas. They have the Sphere, cool facility, but how do you program for the Sphere? So they have actually another little area with a little dome. So we basically we bought some small speakers so we can actually set up a scalable immersive system for programming that doesn't tie up the theater.
Right.
That's something that we started playing with. So that's kind of where I am with working on trying to come up with
kind of one of the questions I'm kind of going towards here is like, How are you? You know, you mentioned before we started that you've got a lot of friends in the industry that you like to bounce things off of. And, I guess it's just a kind of a general question of what kind of stuff do you guys talk about when you talk shop, and what are you guys doing to stay current, collectively around all of your schools and do all this stuff? Because everything is just changing at such a rapid rate.
Yeah, so I mean, immersive is one of them. I mean, it's becoming more popular. A couple summers ago, I helped a friend of mine rebuild his studio to an Atmos immersive studio. We have a WSG Designs immersive studio on campus, but then we also converted one of the classrooms to a immersive listening room because it is becoming more and more um, part of it. What's happening on Broadway is happening in other areas, and we have one of the top music theater programs in the country. So to be able to do that as part of that program, I think is a great thing. I try to do it. I have former students. I have, I think we have two at Eighth Day, three at Claire now. I keep in touch with them to make sure that we're staying up, see what trends are happening on that level, so that we're staying up with it as well.
You really kind of segued perfectly into my last question. So, regarding students that you work with, what do you like to impart with them as they start to embark on life in the real world once they graduate?
Well, so we try very much to give them as much of an experience as possible. I know I can't do the scale, but I can make sure that we're doing the same things so that it's easy for them to scale. Right now, I think we have a combination of a couple of different ways that I interact. So we have student workers. So there's at the moment 28 of them. I don't ever deal with all 20 at a time, but we'll rotate them through. I helped develop the initial syllabus for the live sound production class, and I taught it for 3 semesters. It just was too much to do this job and at the same time, but I still lecture in that. So I basically, we talk about the lectures I do are one on RF and another one on electrical safety. But if you're working for me, I'm going to ask for block diagrams, input lists. I'm going to ask you to coordinate wireless. I'm going to ask you to do all the things that you would do for a major concert. So even though most of the stuff is set up, we don't start from old show files. We start fresh on everything. So I'm trying to make sure that they're seeing the importance of that. We repair cables. We make our own extension cords. We talk about stage dressing, how to properly tape cables. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. And for the most part, when you start scaling it up or the students come out, some of our students will take local gigs with the union and they come back and they're like, oh, I see they did this right, or this was horrible. And they didn't, I always think about what you told me because they weren't doing it the way you said. And I saw it was a mess. So we try to do a lot of modeling of the ways to do it. And I think that's came from me, being out in the industry. So coming here, I want to make sure they're getting at least enough experience that if they want to pursue this as a career, they can.
Yeah, you're getting it really prepared for the real world. All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time today, Rick. I know you're a very busy guy, so we very much appreciate this. And we appreciate your partnership and your insights. And we're happy to hear that you get these great experiences with us because that's what we live for. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. And like I said, I appreciate all you guys have done for us. It's been a good partnership, and I do like the revamped website, and I check once a week just to see what else you got, contact wise.